my psychology project was around the post-traumatic slave syndrome theory. Okay, so post-traumatic slave syndrome is a theory that explains the adaptive survival behaviors in African American communities throughout the United States and the diaspora. It's a condition that exists as a consequence of multi generational oppression of Africans and their descendants resulting from centuries of slavery. This is a quote from Dr. Joy DeGruy. She is a clinical psychiatrist, a renowned educator. She does plenty of seminars and workshops in colleges and high schools around the US. And she is also the author of this book, Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome. Have not read the book, but I used excerpts I found from online to do my research. And I also listened to her lectures and seminars that are on YouTube. They're about 3 hours long, but I was able to get most of my information from there. So one of the main points that DeGruy hits home, she spends about an hour and a half talking about this. I'm going to do this in about just a minute. She explains how Black people were taken from their homeland, which already causes trauma, and then once they got here, they were mistreated, beaten, raped, sold, pretty much anything you can imagine. And that trauma is pretty much never dealt with, because even when like slaves were free, there was still the whole Jim Crow era, which still doesn't leave room for healing to happen. And it aids in certain things and certain protective qualities being passed down. So one example that she gives, she doesn't think Black moms talk proudly of their Black sons a lot, and she explains that back when slaves were working on a plantation, if there's like a Black woman who was like working in the fields and their master came along and said, oh, your son, like he's doing like really well, he's really coming along, their first instinct would be to say, oh no, my son, he's really not that great, he's pretty bad. Not because she wasn't proud of her son, but because she knew that if the master thought that her son was worth something, it was good, that he would be sold and shipped away to slavery. And certain things like that get passed down, and that's just one of the main points that DeGruy tries to hit. Traumatic slave syndrome leads to MAP, so multi-generational trauma together with continued oppression, leads to absence of opportunity to heal or access the benefits available to the society, leads to post-traumatic slave syndrome. So that's her acronym over there. And one of the key like patterns of it is low self-esteem, internalized racism. And internalized racism is just things like not liking your hair type or wishing that you were had lighter skin, or preferring lighter skin. Those are just some examples of just internalized racism. Or like the idea of colorism in the Black community, that's also internalized racism. And then extreme feelings of suspicion, perceived negative motivations of others is another aspect, or I guess symptom, of post-traumatic slave syndrome. Going to the survey, originally I was going to do a kind of a documentary type thing and interview a lot of different people, but that wasn't really doable. So real quick, I did not intend to have this many responses to go through. I didn't realize that I could click off the stop accepting responses until it was too late. But anyway, the first thing I asked was, what are your pronouns? And you can see the majority of people who took this survey went by she, her pronouns. Originally, it was overwhelmingly, the amount of results I got were overwhelmingly Caucasian, and the people who were, all the minorities were kind of like down here. And so I made a post asking for that to be evened out, and then this just absolutely skyrocketed. So about 143 of the people who took this survey were African American. And basically I just made statements, and some of you probably took this, but I made statements like, oh, I have high self-esteem, and 1 would be strongly disagree, and then 4 is strongly agree, and then 2 is slightly disagree, and then 3 is slightly agree. So just looking through what we got here, most people who took this, they agreed they had high self-esteem. The majority of people were suspicious of others, or thought they were suspicious of others. Growing up, my parents praised me in front of others. Most people strongly agreed with that. Or like overall, like before I separate things out, overall people strongly agree that their parents praised them. Um, People feel that they need to prove themselves. I've been criticized by people in my community for how I wear my hair. A lot of people strongly disagreed on that one. And growing up, I wish I had a lighter skin complexion, and that is, again, people strongly disagreed. So, with that in mind, I did my best to section out the data a little bit more. Not for each question, because it took much more time than I thought it would to separate the data, but I did it at least for some of the questions. So going back to this, so the survey criticized how you wear my hair. Okay, the majority of people strongly disagreed with that. But when you break it down into the amount of people who agreed with it, this represents people who agree that they've been criticized for their hair. So you got 70% of black people who've said that they have been criticized for how they wear their hair, and then about 14% white, 4.4% Asian, then 7.4 Hispanic, and then 1.5 Indian. Also, real quick, I let people type in whatever identity they wanted. I assumed that Indian would fall under Asian, but I guess they just wanted to type it out in case you were wondering why that's not under Asian. I didn't have it like that originally. But anyway. And then again, for my parents, for people who selected, my parents didn't praise me growing up. If you go back to like the main survey, the majority of people agreed that their parents had praised them growing up. But when you go into the people who either disagreed or strongly disagreed about their parents praising them, you have 67% of black people who say, like almost 2/3 of black people who said that they didn't get praised by their parents growing up. And then again, I kept the colors the same so you can just follow the breakdown. But then as I was getting this data, I started wondering if it was possibly skewed because the numbers weren't even. What did I do? I basically went to the whole question where it said, growing up, I wish I had a lighter skin complexion. And I went and did it both ways. So here, growing up, I wanted a lighter skin complexion. I did the agree first. And so this is the amount of black people who agreed. I don't know why I cut off the I guess I accidentally cropped off the percentage, but this is again same color. Amount of black people who agreed with that statement. And then this is the amount of black people who disagreed, saying like they did not want a lighter skin tone growing up. It's pretty close. So again, I think that this data is kind of skewed because there was such an imbalance in the amount of people who took the survey. And so I kind of stopped dividing the data up after that because I felt like it didn't really make a difference. It seems to be pretty close between the black people who agree versus the amount who disagree. I mean, there's still a difference, but it's still. I just felt like it could have been better. So anyway, with those things in mind, improvement, yes, this needed more variation. There could have been more balance in the amount of people, the amount of people who took this survey. And I could have done like more research on generational trauma outside of DeGroo's theory, or outside of DeGroo's theory, and just research generational trauma on my own. And I think if I could go back and do it again, that's something I would change. I also wouldn't give so much variation from like disagree, strongly disagree. I think it could have been just agree or disagree. I didn't think it needed to have all of that. But anyway, thank you guys. Here are the links below to DeGroy's her seminars, and then here's her main website that talks in depth about post-traumatic slave syndrome. But honestly, I don't really, yeah, again, I don't really know if my results proved her theory. I think they're interesting. And I think it gave me insight on what I could do better if I tried to do this again. But thanks.